Here is a number that should stop you cold. A robot that can run, climb stairs, and carry a payload, the kind of machine Boston Dynamics spent decades and hundreds of millions of dollars perfecting, is now available from a Chinese company for roughly the price of a mid-range luxury car. Not a prototype, not a government showcase, a product you can actually order. That's the signal I want to follow today. Welcome to the China Memo, where Chinese reality meets the Western point of view. I'm your host, born in China, trained in Western finance. Last episode, we stayed inside the data center and talked about GPUs. Today, we're stepping into the physical world, into the factories, warehouses, and campuses where AI stops being an abstract model and starts walking on legs. Our subject today is UniTree. And the question I want to answer isn't, are their robots impressive? Anyone with a YouTube account already know the answer. The question is, what does UniTree actually tell us about where China's industrial ambitions are heading? And how much of this is real, today versus still a bet on the future? To answer that, I'll give you 3 things. First, what UniTree says it is, and whether the scale, pricing, and the product roadmap actually match the marketing. Second, where it fits in China's broader robotics push, and what role policy is genuinely playing versus just providing a tailwind of rhetoric. And third, what signals to watch. Whether you're tracking capital flows, industrial operations, or China's technology strategy, I will give you the specific markers that can separate real adoption from a very expensive demo reel. Let's start. Before we continue, this content is for educational and informational purposes only. I'm a market observer, not your investment advisor. Nothing here constitutes financial advice. Let's start from the inside out. If you read UniTree's own materials, not the press releases written for Western audiences, but the Chinese language product documentation and the founder interviews, they don't call themselves a robot dog company. They describe themselves as a civilian robotics firm focused on high-performance legged robots and general-purpose humanoids, with independent development of core components. That phrase, independent development of core components, is doing a lot of work. In other words, they are not just assembling parts bought from other suppliers. They claim to develop their own actuators, reduction gears, and controllers in-house. Think of it like the difference between a car company that designs its own engine versus one that buys engines from a third party and bolts them into a chassis. One has an IP, the other has assembly skills. UniTree is positioning itself firmly in the first category. Now here's the interesting part. The product catalog is wide, deliberately so. Smaller quadrupeds, that's 4-legged robots, think robot dogs, sold to universities, research labs, and even high-end hobbyists. More rugged models for industrial inspection or outdoor terrain, and increasingly full-size humanoid robots positioned for research, logistics, and future factory work. The story they're telling is, we are not a one-off showpiece. We're building a family of embodied AI platforms with a supply chain, a component stack, and a roadmap that scales. Whether the execution matches that ambition is what we are going to test. Marketing language is cheap. What matters is whether they've actually scaled beyond the lab. One way to measure that is headcount and revenue. UniTree's founder has stated publicly that The company grew from a single-person operation in 2016 to more than 1,000 employees today, with annual revenue reaching approximately 1 billion yuan. That's roughly 140 million US dollars. To put that in context, that's non-trivial for a robotics startup. But it's still small relative to established industrial automation firms. Consider it as a company that's moved from a garage to a real factory floor, but hasn't yet landed the Fortune 500 contracts that will validate the model at scale. Now, the more revealing signal is pricing. UniTree's go-to quadruped, their flagship robot dog, starts at around 16,000 US dollars. Boston Dynamics Spot has been priced more than $75,000. That's not just cheaper, that's a different market segment entirely. In other words, at $75,000, you're selling to large enterprises with dedicated robotics budgets and long procurement cycles. At 16,000, you're selling to university research labs, smaller industrial operators, startups running inspection pilots, customers who were previously priced out entirely. Think of it the way the smartphone market evolved. At first, only large enterprises had mobile data strategies. Then the cost of devices dropped, and suddenly everyone had one. China is running that same cost compression playbook on legged robots. Drive down the unit price using manufacturing scale, expand the addressable market, and grow outward from there. The pattern is familiar. The question is whether it works in hardware the same way it worked in handsets. Most people first encounter UniTree through short clips, a robot dog trotting through a park, or a humanoid sparring in a boxing ring. Those clips are doing two jobs simultaneously. Externally, they are marketing. They prove to potential customers and investors that the hardware is agile, robust, and real. Not a render, not a concept. A machine that falls over and recovers. Internally, they are also engineering stress tests, a way to push locomotion, balance, and control algorithms in dynamic environments that are hard to simulate in a lab. But if you read past the videos into the technical and product notes, the real strategic move is the transition from quadrupeds to humanoids. Now, here's why that matters. Legged robots are hard. Humanoid robots, machines shaped like people, walking upright, are much harder. But they are also more economically interesting for a very specific reason. Almost everything in our built environment, door handles, conveyor belt heights, steering wheels, staircases, was designed around human dimensions. In other words, a humanoid robot can theoretically walk into any factory, warehouse, or office that was built for human workers and start operating, without anyone having to redesign the building. That's the unlock, and it's why every major robotics player globally is racing towards humanoid form right now. UniTree's H-series humanoids are human scale, with 3D perception, arms and hands with enough degrees of freedom to handle simple manipulation tasks, and the locomotion speeds that are already in the range of a brisk walking pace. Right now, most tasks are still scripted or constrained, picking or placing specific objects, navigating predefined routes, but the direction of travel is clear. Take the locomotion expertise built through years of quadruped development, add upper body dexterity, and aim at environments where fixed industrial arms simply cannot go. To understand why UniTree matters as a signal, not just as a product. You have to step back and look at the macro backdrop. China's robotics market is now one of the largest in the world. By 2024, the market was estimated at roughly $47 billion, with industrial robots alone generating over $33 billion in revenue. Robot installations have grown at double-digit rates. Robot density, that's the number of robots per 10,000 workers on production lines, has climbed steadily. And official planning documents increasingly treat robotics as part of the structural solution to two problems that are not going away: an aging workforce and rising labor costs. In that landscape, UniTree occupies a specific and interesting niche. On one side, classic industrial robot manufacturers, companies that sell fixed arms for welding, painting, and assembly. Think of these as the robots that stay in one place and do one thing very well. On the other, a newer generation building humanoids and leg systems, robots that can theoretically walk into a facility designed for humans and start doing useful work without tearing up the infrastructure. Chinese media and officials have started spotlighting companies in that second group. UniTree's founder appears at government-linked events. Their products show up in coverage, which Beijing calls new quality productive forces. A policy phrase that, translated into plain English, means we want to move up the value chain into high-tech manufacturing. The message is consistent. These are not toys. They are intended as symbols of technological upgrading. Now, here's the important nuance. That doesn't automatically translate into guaranteed orders or subsidies. But it does mean UniTree is operating with the wind of policy rhetoric at its back. And in China's system, that matters. Let me give you three lenses on this. What's grounded, what's aspirational, and where the gap still exists. On the grounded side, UniTree ships real hardware. Robots are out in the field, not just on slides. The company has built a team of over 1,000 people and a revenue base that is non-trivial by robotics startup standards. And China's domestic demand for automation is structurally real. Demographic pressure and wage growth are long-term drivers, not cyclical ones. On the aspirational side, large-scale, proven deployments of legged or humanoid robots in harsh industrial environments are still rare, globally, not just in China. Many of the impressive demos are engineering proofs, not yet business cases. They show what's possible, not what's economically available today. Think of it like early enterprise software. You have a powerful tool that works perfectly in a controlled demo environment, but the actual value isn't in the software itself, it's in the implementation. Getting it to run reliably inside a real facility, alongside legacy systems, human workers, and unpredictable daily workflows, is a massive integration hurdle. The hardware is ready for the floor, but the operating system for the factory is still being written. And the gap. Right now, UniTree and its peers are testing product market fit outside the lab. Some customers are paying for early-stage systems in narrow use cases, inspection, patrol, demonstration. But broad-scale deployment in factories and logistics, that's emerging, not proven. So the right mental model is not China has solved humanoid robots, and it's not this is all vaporware either. It's that UniTree is at the leading edge of that sector that is just starting to convert from demonstration to deployment. That transition, if and when it happens at scale, is what makes this worth watching. Now, what does all of this actually reveal? The answer depends entirely on your lens. If you're watching capital flows, UniTree could be a barometer. How its funding rounds, customer announcements, and export deals evolve over the next few months or years will indicate whether embodied AI in China is moving from narrative to revenue. It's also a window into component dependencies. What sensors, chips, and actuators show up inside these robots? To what extent are they domestically sourced versus imported? That tells you something concrete about supply chain resilience on the export controls, a question that is going to become increasingly important as geopolitical friction continues. If you're planning industrial operations, the question isn't, is this technology impressive? It's where could a UniTree class system create measurable value today, not in 5 years? Inspection, security patrols, hazardous environments where you are currently sending people. Those are the near-term use cases where business case might already close, even with current limitations. Early pilots will review integration complexity, maintenance requirements, and whether the economics actually work. If the technology isn't ready for your specific use case, that's useful information too. It tells you how far the sector still has to travel. If you are tracking policy, pay attention to where humanoids and legged robots show up in government programs, subsidy catalogs, and the pilot zone announcements. That's where Beijing is directing the experiment, and where the first real deployment clusters will likely form. Companies like UniTree, invited to national events featured in official statistics showcased at international expos, offer direct visibility into how serious that ambition is and where resources are being concentrated. So here is how to make this actionable. Over the coming month, watch for 3 specific markers. First, sustained deployment with named customers. No pilots, no press releases about partnerships. Repeat orders, multi-year contracts, and the customers willing to go on records about operational results. That's a signal that the technology has cleared the integration hurdle. Second, meaningful export volumes outside China. If UniTree is shipping at scale into markets with established robotics ecosystems, for example, Germany, Japan, the United States, that's a proof that the technology competes on merit, not just on domestic policy support. Third, the next funding round and what it implies. A higher valuation with credible institutional investors signals continued confidence in the trajectory. A flat or down round or a pivot in strategy tells you that the gap between demonstration and the deployment is proving harder to close than expected. These episodes give you the baseline to measure against. 12 months from now, perhaps we will have a much cleaner read on which direction this is actually heading. This has been the China Memo. Primary sources, no noise. Today we used UniTree, not as a futuristic curiosity, but as a lens on how China is attempting to turn AI into locomotion, balance, and eventually labor. I'm your host. Thank you for listening.